it's time to pick a fight. And if liberals in the Senate would rather play political games and shut down the government instead of making a small down payment on fiscal discipline and reform, I say, shut it down.
Those fighting words from Congressman Mike Pence, who is rallying up the Tea Party to shut down the government.
All right, just a reminder to everybody out there, though, Mike Pence wants to be the next governor of Indiana. He's probably not even going to have to come back to Washington and answer for shutting it down. Top Line starts right now.
Hello and welcome to ABC News Top Line. I'm Rick Klein.
And I'm Amy Walter.
Every day at noon Eastern, right here bringing you the latest in politics. It's twitter.com/Rick Klein, twitter.com/Amy E. Walter. Amy, we're back together here on the old set.
I know you. I did like being on the road. I think we need to do a little bit more of
that.
No
crashing in the set here. What's on your mind today?
So we think.
That's
it is
right.
April Fool's. All right, first Top Line. Working for the weekend. Well, new jobs report out today showed employers adding over 216,000 jobs last month. That's the good news. The bad news, the unemployment remains pretty high. It's up at 8.8%. Now, if you go back historically, no president since 1980 has been reelected when the unemployment rate was over 7.2%. There was that guy named Jimmy Carter.
I heard of him.
Remember that? And that guy, George H.W. Bush,
Also
both looking at mid-7s. So that is the number everybody's looking for. You talk to political strategists, though, they say the real issue is not the number, but the trend. As long as the trend's going down,
and they've got a couple of months. It does seem like the recovery is moving in the right direction. And the biggest thing, I think, for the trend is for people to accept the trend before the election. You have to understand it and process it and think the economy is growing. Next up today, it's cut it or shut it. Tea Party supporters came to Washington yesterday with a message for Republicans: let the government shut down rather than compromise on any spending cuts. And this is exactly the battle that John Boehner has inside his own caucus right now. There's dissension in his own ranks. How far to go? He doesn't have a deal yet to begin to sell to them, but he's going to have to at some point get them on board for this and then hope for Democratic support as well. But he's going to be pitted against the Tea Partiers.
Well, and, then you have folks like Newt Gingrich going up and talking to freshmen yesterday saying, okay, you want to push it as far as you can. Shutdown might not be so good, but get what you can out of the deal. And Democrats, too, hoping that they can put Republicans on the line here. All right, next up, Sunshine Stay. Well, Florida Republicans say now they're just fine with the late February primary. Earlier this week, there was a call from South Carolina and Iowa party chairmen saying that if Florida kept their January 31st date, that they should be penalized by losing the convention. Now, Republicans now in Florida saying, you know what, we'll do it in late February. Don't worry about it. We're really trying to jump ahead into January. But when you talk to Republican strategists and insiders, they say, look, if Florida moves up, everybody's going to move up and the dominoes are going to fall. And you know what that really means, Rick?
What does that mean?
That means you could be in Des Moines for New Year's again.
I'd rather be in Florida for New Year's personally, but that's just a personal opinion. Next up, and finally today, it's rainbows and unicorns. Keeping in mind today's date, of course, we're bringing you some exclusive imagery from President Obama's re-election kickoff. Sort of. This one might be from some clever folks at a particular campaign committee, but check out what purports to be the first ad of President Obama's re-election campaign.
Can't wait.
A president with the courage to tell us,
we will not rest. I will not rest. We will not rest.
To tackle the great challenges of our generation.
And I'm picking Kansas. I think that Kansas has more firepower.
President Obama, 4 more years.
And, of course, that's actually courtesy of the National Republican Senatorial Committee having a little bit of fun.
I think that rainbows and unicorns is a great tagline. I think they should actually use it.
It works.
America loves unicorns.
It works for me. And of course, speaking of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, they've got a lot of big elections on their plate. And one of the men who is going to have a critical role, perhaps, in how the Republican establishment responds to a lot of these is Senator Pat Toomey. He spent some time with Jon Karl as part of the Subway series. Take a look at their chat.
Senator Toomey.
You've done this before.
Yeah. Welcome to the Subway series.
All right.
Yeah,
thank
absolutely. It's good to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
That was a hell of a campaign to cover in Pennsylvania, and now you're here.
Yeah.
And you're one of the you were Tea Party before there was really a Tea Party. I mean, the Club for Growth, pushing for conservative principles against party leadership. What's it going to be like now that you're here?
Well, I'll tell you what, there is definitely a very different mindset or prevailing thought process here than when I was in the House 6 years ago. A much stronger consensus among my Republican colleagues, certainly, that we really need to get spending
got to ask you, you came here by toppling, really ultimately Arlen Specter, because it was your campaign that pushed him out of the Republican Party. Okay, Olympia Snowe has a virtually identical voting record to what Arlen Specter had as a Republican. Is she somebody that's ripe for a challenge from the right?
Oh, look, I think this is a very dynamic environment, and probably almost every Republican senator is going to face a primary challenge. I think this will be a season and a cycle, as the last one was, where primary challenges are very, very common.
Okay, what about Senator Snowe, though? Would you support her if she came and asked you for her support?
I'm not following individual races very closely.
You don't need to follow that too closely. She's one of your colleagues.
I'm not going to be opposing any of my colleagues.
You won't be opposing, and would you be supporting?
I'm just not going to be opposing. I'm not going to be getting involved in a lot of races. I got plenty of work to do. That's what I'm going to focus on.
If you'd had your old job of Club for Growth president,
well, then that would be a different set of circumstances, and someone else has that job, and you can ask him what he's going to do.
As you know, the debate now over funding the government for the rest of the year is, we're basically at an impasse. If it comes to government shutdown, how bad do you think that would be, or would it necessarily not be that bad?
A government shutdown is very disruptive, right? It's no way to run the government. This is very irresponsible. As you know, we're cleaning up business. It should have been done last year. But
Right.
last year, Congress decided not to even pass a budget. So we have the world's biggest enterprise. It spends $3.7 trillion, and they don't have a budget. They didn't go through the appropriation process. They kicked the can down the road. What are we on, the 5th continuing resolution or something? If you go back to last year when they started. No, it might well be. I've lost track, right? This is absolutely no way to run the government.
But we first need to get the government funded for the rest of the year. What I'm asking you is, if it comes down to a choice of either cuts that aren't anywhere near where you really want to be, or shutting the government down, where do you go? Is it worth pushing this right up to the edge and maybe over the edge of a government shutdown?
Well, I don't want to see a government shutdown.
I understand that.
And I don't know any of my colleagues who do, and I voted for the first House-passed continuing resolution, and I voted for both of the short-term resolutions.
Right.
But I'm probably finished voting for short-term resolutions. I think we should solve this problem and move on. You know, the bill probably, it certainly won't be the bill that I would write if I had that power. But, I really think the American people spoke very, very clearly last fall that we got to get spending under control. We got to cut spending. This is the first step. It's a small step, but we ought to start here.
Okay, now on the debt ceiling, obviously the president will soon ask for an increase in the debt ceiling. You've heard from the White House that it would be catastrophic if this were not passed because we would essentially default on our debt. You have a plan on that, though.
Yeah.
Your plan, as I understand it, is basically you pay the creditors. You make sure that the creditors are paid first.
Well, first of all, everybody knows, including the administration, that if we don't raise the debt ceiling, we're not going to default on our debt. What my bill does, it codifies what a Treasury Secretary would do anyway, which is to take the ongoing revenue from tax resources, which amount to almost 70% of everything the government's planning to spend next year, and use that to make sure that we don't default on our debt, because a default on our debt would be catastrophic. Okay. It's a very easy thing to avoid, and we will avoid it.
Okay, I have to admit, I don't get it politically. I don't get your how it flies politically, because essentially what you're saying is let's be sure we pay Chinese bankers first, and then we can worry about paying whatever else is out there.
That's a good talking point that you picked up from somebody on the other side. But the fact is, most of our debt is held by Americans.
Okay.
And it's held by savers,
senior
citizens who have 401ks and IRAs. It's held by municipalities that have, towns and townships that have to put some spare cash.
Sure, and a lot's held by foreign.
And recently, a lot's been held overseas. The Treasury Secretary and the administration has made the argument that defaulting on our debt would be catastrophic. Yep. That is correct. And so my purpose is to simply say, let's not have a catastrophe. And so what I'm suggesting is, let's have a reform to this process. Let's have a balanced budget amendment. Let's have spending caps. Let's put a fiscal straitjacket on this government so that we live within our means, stop spending so much money we don't have, and then we can raise the debt limit. But let's fix what's broken that got us here.
Now, as a member of the House, you famously took a term limit pledge, 3 terms, and then you actually, unlike many others, you actually abided by it, and you retired from the House. But no term limit pledge here, or is there?
I've not made a term limits pledge. I think it's very unlikely that I'd serve more than 2 terms, but I haven't made that commitment the way I did in the House.
Sarah Palin endorsed you. fairly early on when you were running for Senate. You going to return the favor and endorse her if she runs?
I don't know if she's even running yet. I've not given any thought to whom I'm going to endorse, if anyone. So, no decision.
Could you see yourself supporting Sarah Palin for president?
Look, I'll cross that bridge when I see what this field looks like.
Sounds decidedly non-committal, which might be a good place to be right about now.
I don't even know who's going to be running. Neither do you. I'm not sure that Sarah Palin knows whether or not she's running. I don't know.
All right. Well, Senator Toomey, really appreciate you taking time to talk with us here on the Subway Series.
Thanks for having me.
And here's our final stop. All right. Take care.
All right, well, there we go. Jon Karl getting Senator Toomey a little riled up there, talking about the debt ceiling, and that's what we like to do here on Top of That.